Hello and welcome to the Move Your Business Forward podcast. These talks are hosted by Rob Boll, founder of Evoke Management and CEO of International Leaders UK. He'll be talking with experts from both these companies about issues that affect SME companies today.
Today, our next series of the Big Squeeze podcast, I'm joined by a couple of colleagues from Evoke, Keith and Robert. Welcome both of you. Good to have you here today.
Hello.
So today we're talking specifically about cash flow. The Big Squeeze campaign has been talking about all the things that businesses are really struggling with right now. Prices going up, inflationary pressure, supply chain issues, finding and recruiting staff. Never before has cash been more important to a business to help it survive, to help it manage opportunities and deal with all the complexity that's around with inflation, supply chain and all the other things as well. So we're going to talk about cash flow and particularly what we believe are the most important 7 essential drivers that can have a positive impact on your cash in your business. So that's what we're going to talk about, and we're going to share some tips and advice on how to address these 7 drivers. We're all qualified accountants here, so we're going to try and make this as lively as possible because that's important, and make sure we just give some good thoughts between us. So 7 drivers, we should probably explain what they are. So to me, the only 7 drivers you have to adjust your cash position in the business is looking at your price. So what price point are you selling your goods at? What's your volume of transactions? The cost of goods, the margin you make on those products or services, and then overheads. So those are your profit for drivers, and then balance sheet drivers on cash. How quickly you're collecting money from people, how you're managing your inventory if you have inventory, or how quickly you're billing for work that you've done and therefore reducing your work in progress. And then finally, how you pay money to your suppliers on what terms. There are only 7 drivers. Those are the only things you can impact, but there's lots of things underneath those things that we can talk about. Keith, if we start with price, or Robert, price, who's going to come in first with tips on price to get better cash position?
Well, the key thing on price, if you're worried about increasing your prices, is knowing exactly what your competitors are doing.
Yeah.
We're all going to be scared of putting our prices up 5%, but you're going to look pretty silly if you only put yours up 5% whilst the industry is putting them up 10%. So don't be afraid. I mean, at the moment with double-digit inflation, everybody's expecting a hike in price.
Well, it's perfect time to actually put your prices up.
Absolutely.
And have a reason for it. Keith,
Yeah.
what were your thoughts?
And also, depending on the type of business that you're in, if you're in a service industry or a luxury goods industry, don't be afraid of putting your price up because you're catering for that audience that can afford it. And very often it's the service that adds to the product. If your service is immaculate, then that's the edge you have with your competitors in putting an additional cost to your product.
And linking that to simple things like supply chain, if you have supply of a good and therefore you can deliver what you're trying to deliver, you can charge more for that because in the day you're getting the result, and that's a positive decision.
And after sales support, ring up your client. Did you get it on time? Were you happy you got the right amount? Was it all the right quantity? And then that leads you to say, and when's your next order? When would you like to place the next order? Just keep in touch with them.
I always think, if you went into 2 hotel rooms and they look the same and one puts a chocolate on the pillow and the other one didn't, it's the one with the chocolate on the pillow that you're going to think it was the best hotel room, and it was only a chocolate.
Yeah. If you like chocolate, that is.
If you like chocolate.
So linking, Robert, nice segue into volume. Opportunity to talk about next order. Volume, number of transactions that we do is clearly a big driver in cash. So
yes, and frequency of delivering.
Yeah.
Are you delivering the customer once a month? You could deliver them twice, and you can then start invoicing every 2 weeks. You can still be applying your 30-day credit or whatever it is, but let's have an invoice in the middle of the month as well. Look at the volumes. Just mix it up. Don't just there are different ways delivering 1,000 products a month. Why not deliver 500, invoice them for 500, then deliver another 500? You'll get that first 500 paid half a month quicker.
The other important thing here is understanding the ratio between price and volume as well, right? Can you afford to put your price up and potentially reduce volume of transactions because you've priced yourself out? Does that work? Or should you be or have the ability to potentially offer a bit of a discount for volume, knowing you've got that impact there? And I think that's the important thing. You've got to understand it. And anyone looking at numbers like we do know what the result's going to be, or can model it out and look at those scenarios.
Yeah, I mean, if you're selling a commodity, that's definitely, I think people like to feel they've got a deal.
Yeah.
So if you're asking for, a forward order in excess of what they were originally going to order, and they get a discount for that, that's always going to be welcomed, I think, in certain industries. In addition, if you are in a service industry, or you're charging for your time, you can offer more time for that amount, and encourage people to pay you up front to get that extra benefit. There's lots of ways of negotiating with your client to get money up front. Whether it's as I say, a consultancy business, where you give them more time for that reduced fee, if it's up front. If not, they have to pay it as and when you do it, which could be more expensive. It's almost like a solicitor. When if you go to a probate solicitor, they don't usually get paid until the probate's completed. Some solicitors actually agree a fee up front to a maximum, so long as you pay them in stages throughout the probate, rather than they get paid at the end. So there's all kinds of deals that can be done.
Yeah,
and I think it's all about knowing your customer and talking to them and offering them various different permutations. I mean, one thing that lockdown should have enabled people to do is to work out which one of their clients have got money and which ones haven't. And then you can focus on the ones that have got money, offer them quantity discounts, offer them prompt payment discounts, because they've got the ability to cash in on all that and increase their own margin, because they've got cash. And what you mustn't do is, somebody who's struggled to pay you over lockdown, don't give them even more credit.
Yeah.
So many of the reasons that people don't get paid is because they've got a query or question on an invoice, or the invoice was sent to the wrong person and not the person that agreed it. And that's very, very common. That's the delay in getting paid very often. So it's important to, from the very beginning, be upfront with your costs, with any agreement, with the person that is authorized, and have it in writing is essential.
And I think the other thing here, just coming back to price and volume, is making sure the business is aligned between finance, commercial people in the business, and your sales team. Your sales
the workflow
have to know what they can offer, what they've got remit to do, because there comes a point where if a deal's to be done and they know the parameters they're working between, they can get that done. Just going through these 7 drivers, so price, volume, we're covering these briefly in the time we've got, but it's just meant to be a few tips here we can share. So cost of goods or margin, this is another thing to drive. Robert, any thoughts on margin at the moment? How to improve margin?
Well, again, I mean that you flip that on its head, right? When you're buying in, right? Can you get any more discount on quantities? Right. And obviously the reverse is, how long can you work a payment plan? So you might say, I will commit to buy X number of units in a year, in order to get the best possible unit price. But then you say, but then I want to take it. Stagger your deliveries and therefore stagger your payment.
Yep.
And you may just get a better price by committing for the next 12 months that just says, I'll only buy what I need from you, and it's 100,000 units.
And it's all about building that relationship with your supply chain. Yeah, we're all in some challenging times together. Let's work together, have the conversation. How can we help each other?
I mean, a business is interested in its profitability. That can be gained by price and turnover or lower costs. So you can negotiate to put your prices up with your client, and you can negotiate with your suppliers to reduce their prices and get a better deal. Both avenues will increase your profit.
And I think one thing people don't always do is, you might have a long-term arrangement with a client to deliver a particular product or that you've agreed to. If that product that you're offering is no longer the most suitable product because there's something else on the market or pricing has changed, revisit it. Yeah, someone might have agreed to have this delivered to them for the next 12 months, but if there's something better now, which is going to be easier for you, a better price for them, or look at it, talk about it. I think people sometimes get locked into an agreement, we have to deliver that because that's what we signed up for. Have the conversation, see if you can renegotiate or change something.
Yeah, I mean, there's nothing better than going to a client and saying, do you know what? I know I said that we could do this for you, but I've just seen this and I think this would be better.
Yeah.
They love it.
Yeah.
Because you've been thinking about them.
Yeah. So overheads, the final profit driver of cash, overheads. And I think a lot of people through the pandemic has really reduced overhead, got rid of offices, potentially reduced staff costs. I think everyone seems to think overhead, got to crack overhead. And I think the important thing is looking at it and understanding, actually, is it worth the effort? If I squeeze another 10% out of my overheads, in the scheme of things, is it worth the effort? Where I could just encourage team to say, look, if we can increase our margin, increase our revenue through price and volume, then we can cover all the overhead we've got and some, and pay people better. I think that's the thing. Do you need to look at overhead? Should that be a priority, or have you done overhead enough to focus on some other stuff? Thoughts?
Always keep an eye on your overheads. I mean, you predictable response, but make sure you know exactly where you're spending every penny and what benefit, what return you're getting on it. Try wherever possible to measure a return. Obviously, marketing is the most obvious, but looking at your staff and your churn on your staff and your recruitment costs. You may actually be saying, I might be better off putting in a bonus scheme and keeping staff longer than just accept that 2 or 3 are going to leave every month and then I pay recruitment costs or agency staff to fill in. Just look at the different ways where you can actually be more efficient and save money. And what I will always say is, whilst we've talked about sales being the preserve of salespeople, right? Everybody in the company sooner or later is involved in costing you money or spending you money. Get them all thinking. Can I, where can I trim things? Can I look at benchmarking against an alternative supplier all the time? And just get people into that. I mean, we should all be, turning off light bulbs, turning down the thermostat in that penny saving mind now, because it's all through our life at work and at home. Just communicate what you're spending and incentivize staff to come up with cost saving ideas.
Yeah,
I think.
Sorry, Keith, go ahead.
I was going to say, when a company's been running a few years and they're used to spending so much money and they're used to having the IT consultant and they're used to having this, subscription, whatever they've got. And then something like the pandemic hits, what you have to do is you have to go through their overheads and you have to ask them, well, I mean, the obvious question is, you ask them, do you actually need this? And let's imagine we were starting the company again today. Do you actually need this to service those clients and sell to those clients, or is it something that historically has built up within your business that you've now got so used to, you think you have to have it? And that's a very good exercise, because quite often people get used to overheads, and they get frightened to cut them out because, if we don't have that, we don't do this. And if there's the emotion attached to it. And the one thing that you have to be careful of with overheads is not get emotionally attached to them, because at the end of the day, if you are spending more than you're earning, you're not going to have a chance to have that emotion anymore, because it's going to be gone. So you have to be strict, as Robert said. Always look at your overheads, always question it. Keep your staff happy, because they're the cogs in the wheel, and and cut where you can.
And in the main, whilst we can influence what our customers do, it's the overheads that you have control of.
Yeah.
Yes, you may have signed up for a 5-year rental agreement, one thing or another, but there's always the option to try and negotiate that.
Yeah.
Every penny you should spend should be a deliberate decision, a conscious, positive decision. And as Keith said, not just, because this is what we always do, or that's what it says we're going to spend in the budget that we made 5 months ago, but the world's a different place than it was 5 months ago.
It really is. Sure. Yeah.
So we've spoken about these four profit drivers of cash: price, volume, margin, and overheads. Let's talk about some balance sheet items. So collecting cash and collecting cash quicker is clearly a way to get more cash in your pocket rather than your customers. How do we improve this?
So if you've got a product that you're selling, and you're the middleman, say you're ordering a light fitting and you sell light fittings, but you have to get them produced, you're going to want to get a deposit, 50% up front, which then, if you're a small company, helps you with the production line cost, the cost of sale itself, and within the agreement, payable, the balance payable upon completion. If you're taking on a new client, I always think it's good to check them out, how big they are, their credit history. If that doesn't prove to be very good, you might want to consider negotiating with that new client that it's your policy to collect by direct debit. You can say that you give 30-day terms on your invoices, but invoice them on the 1st of the month, and it becomes payable on the 30th of the month when you've done the work. So you start on the 1st, but you finish on the 30th. Invoice on the start when you start working, and it's collectible on the day that you finish it on the 30th, rather than invoice them on the 30th and it's another 30 days. So there's your credit agreement. When someone's buying from you, they're only thinking about what you're going to give them for the money, and they want that product, and very often they'll agree to your terms and conditions because they want that product that much. So it's good to be fairly strict and make it as if it's your company policy to operate this way. Not that you're specifically asking them to operate that way, but that's how you do, and usually it works.
And often the people miss a trick by just educating their sales team on these kind of things, right? If
Yeah,
bring this
absolutely.
up at the beginning and everyone knows the importance, then easy.
Yeah.
Robert, any thoughts on collecting money quicker?
Well, I was going to say, if you've got salesmen that go out and knock doors and take orders, then make sure they've got a direct debit form to fill in.
Yeah.
Remember, the dream is to get your clients to pay you by direct debit, whilst meanwhile at the other end, when it's going out the door, you constantly say checks in the post. Yeah,
Uh,
that's the way. And a direct debit. The first thing a direct debit does is tell you straight away when a customer can't afford to pay you,
yeah.
and then you're straight on the phone.
And if they don't agree to the direct debit, it tells you that in advance as well.
Yes.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yeah. 100%.
So, there's some indicators there. Notwithstanding, there are some companies, big companies out there that have their own policy of payment terms, but it doesn't matter what yours are, and you're selling the goods. They say, well, I'm sorry, but these are our payment terms. This is how we pay everyone. It's 60 days, take it or leave it. If it's a big company, a renowned company, then you have to make that decision as to whether you are happy to carry that.
And in that case, you can always do some factoring of some kind, and you just bring that into
That's
your margin.
right.
You say, well, we can, on those terms, we're going to have to charge more, and
Yeah,
you start having those conversations.
yeah.
I'm keen to talk about two other aspects here briefly before we wrap this podcast up. So, managing inventory, and for a service company, not sat with a load of work in progress, just billing as you do the work. I think helps. Any thoughts or tips as to why you should be doing that, or even why companies don't do that and should be doing it?
Yeah, yes. The days of the month end invoice run,
Yeah,
and catch all and then give you 30 days are over.
yeah.
It's so much more efficient to invoice as quickly and as promptly as you can. Obviously, different in different sectors. As Keith alludes to. On one hand, you're delivering a bag of nuts, right, and bolts, right. Then as soon as that's delivered, you should be invoicing. On the other hand, you've got the service thing where it's a bit fluid as to whether that whole service has been delivered within 3 weeks of the month. But have a look at that and just work out what you can do for the best, because by trimming a week off here and a week off there can make all the difference.
I mean, with consultancy as well, the one thing you don't want to do is work a month. Even if you can afford to wait another 30 days once you've invoiced them after that month. Essentially, if you're a consulting company, those people have to be paid within that consulting company. And so, like solicitors, they'll ask you to give them an advance on their consulting fees for the hours, and they'll balance the books at the end. If they've worked more hours, they'll charge you. If they haven't, then it gets
for lawyers that seems to just flow very easily. We have some money on account.
But as well, lawyers are now using factoring companies. They are using factoring companies because they're getting people instruct them, and a lot of the initial work with lawyers or any consulting company, the majority of the work is fairly upfront for the consultant, isn't it? There's a lot of fact finding, a lot of heavy work to be done, and a lot of hours. So, I think one of the keys there is to, again, negotiate with the client and say, we would want a deposit, and that deposit needs to be equal to at least the fees generally that the cost of that consultant's costing for that firm.
Final part, 7 drivers we're talking about. Negotiating terms with your suppliers, so you don't necessarily have to pay as quickly. This is paying your. I'm not pushing people to just not pay their suppliers, but it's just coming up with terms that make sense and are fair. I think that's
one of the things that you can do if you're in the production business is you can tell your supplier that they will get paid when your client pays for that particular production product.
Yeah.
So if I'm an advertising agency and I employ a videographer to come and video something for my client, that videographer, the terms of my payment to the videographer are upon payment from my client. And you have to be strict with that and honest. And if you are and that works, both your suppliers are going to always work for you again because you did exactly what you said you'd do. But that again, helps the burden of the middleman's cash flow.
Yeah, 100%. Robert, any final thoughts?
Stagger your payment runs, and just be honest and open with a supplier. You know, the one people that do a month end payment run, and then this whole payment goes out on backs files. You know, and oh my God, you know, we won't have enough cash. Well, then just ring up your suppliers and say, I'm going to pay you, right? But I'm going to pay you on the 7th of the month after, and you will always get your money.
Yeah.
Just
At least whatever you do,
it, plan it, and keep to your promises.
stay in
And
touch
then-
with stay in touch with them. Whatever you promise them, however small it is, and make it smaller than you can afford actually, but make it happen and do it regularly, and then you've not got any problems.
And be proactive about it. Don't wait for them to pick up the phone and shout at you. Just pick the phone up. People, in my experience, very rarely refuse an offer of a payment next week.
Yeah, 100%. We're out of time for this podcast. There's lots here. We potentially 7 drivers was too much to fit in, but we've covered them. Any final thoughts on cash flow? Anyone listening to this wanting to do one thing to improve their cash position? Robert, what would you tell them to do?
Be proactive, share it with your workforce. Everybody's got ideas, suggestions, contacts that can help. Whatever you do, don't just keep it in a drawer away from anybody.
That's it. Educate everyone. Keith, final thoughts?
If you're a business under 5 years and you turn over less than 5 million, use your cash flow as your ability to afford to buy rather than your P&L, because the difference between your P&L affording it based on your forecast and your actual cash flow, there's a huge gap. There's a time gap there. Don't spend what you haven't got.
Yeah, that's top advice. Excellent. Guys, really enjoyed that today. So thank you for joining me, and we will see you again soon on another podcast.
Thanks for listening. If you'd like more information about the topics discussed in this podcast, then you can find us on our website at moveyourbusinessforward.com.